Meeting to order, the 6th meeting in the Standing Committee on Finance. I want to welcome everyone back to Ottawa. It's good to see everyone. I'm just going to read exactly what it is, the standing order under which we are here meeting today. We're here pursuant to Standing Order 1064. It is a request by at least 4 members of the committee requesting a meeting. All members have received by email a copy of the letter requesting this meeting. The purpose of this meeting, as stated in the letter, is to decide if the committee wishes to study the current debt crisis and economic turmoil in the United States and Europe and its potential impact on Canada, and whether the committee wishes to hold a subsequent meeting or meetings on this issue. This is the only item of business on the agenda today, and I'll just read for your reference a quotation from O'Brien Bosk, pages 1083-84. In considering the request, the committee decides whether or not it wishes to take up the requested subject matter. There is no obligation on the committee to conclude debate. If it decides to consider the matter, it may do so as and when it wishes. So we do have the letter. I should just, for the record, state the letter was signed by 5 members of the committee. So you all should have that letter. And I believe, Ms. Nash, you wanted to lead us off in discussion here today.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for agreeing to get together on fairly short notice. I know no one expected to be here this evening, but certainly the events of the last couple of weeks have captured the attention not just of Canadians, but people around the world, and have been of concern to so many around the world, but to so many Canadians. And we know that the situation in Canada is very different than that of the United States. Our debt to GDP ratio is the best of the G7. We know that we don't in Canada have a debt crisis. We do have other challenges, as we've raised many times in the House and here in committee. We have an unemployment problem, a jobs crisis that still concerns so many Canadians. And our purpose in recommending through this meeting that we hold a study is for the purpose of examining what are the potential impacts to Canada from uncertainties and economic problems, first of all with our major trading partner, the United States, and also in Europe. And what could the potential impact be on Canada, and what options are open to Canada so that we can best prepare ourselves going forward. We've been concerned that the budget this spring was dealing more with deficit and debt reduction as opposed to job creation. That's a concern we have going forward. And so are there opportunities now in a low interest rate environment to do greater strategic infrastructure investment that will better prepare Canada for a stronger recovery going forward. So those are some of the things that we would like to look at. But we think that Canadians would like to be part of this discussion, and that our role as parliamentarians is to ask the questions, to call witnesses, to ask the questions, to raise options for Canadians so that they too can be part of this discussion, and reassure them that parliamentarians are working on economic issues and looking at options going forward that best prepare us for the future. So that's the main reason for us wanting to call a study. And we know that in the past the government has been a bit challenged in terms of deficit projections, pardon me. Even this year, the numbers were overestimating our deficit by $13 billion. So things can change quite quickly. So looking at, where are we in terms of our fiscal projections, what are the numbers that we're looking at, and what are the plans that we have to protect Canadians going forward. We believe that the government has a role to play in terms of economic growth and economic development, and at a time when business is taking a lot of their cash, paying down debt, they're not investing as we would like them to be. Consumers are strapped with a lot of debt, and the role of the government in terms of strategic infrastructure investment could be quite significant in terms of transportation, telecommunications, other kinds of infrastructure. So we would like to hear certainly from the Minister, from the Governor of the Bank of Canada, but we'd also like to hear from independent economists and hear a variety of voices. So again, as I say, so that Canadians can be brought in on the debate and be reassured that as parliamentarians, as the Finance Committee, that we are on top of the issues that are facing us, the economic issues that are facing us in Canada, and that we have options going forward that we feel are fully examined and that we can feel confident in. So that's
Okay.
the rationale for calling the meeting this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Nash. We'll go to Mr. Bryson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think to add to Ms. Nash's comments, I think that we all want to see the committee play a constructive role into providing certainty to Canadians during the global financial turmoil that we've seen in the last few weeks. There is a lot of uncertainty. This committee, Parliament, can actually help provide answers to Canadians, and particularly help provide a vehicle for the government to provide clarity where there's uncertainty now. For many of the last few weeks, a lot of Canadian investors and individuals have seen their expectations change. Clearly, the impact of the last several weeks in terms of global capital markets and the impact on from the U.S. economy and the uncertainty in Europe will have an effect on the government's assumptions, the assumptions upon which the government has made projections. So I think that as members of Parliament, particularly as we return in September, we need to have good information in terms of what the potential impacts of some of these global financial challenges will be on the government's projections, the budget numbers. And I think Canadian investors and Canadian citizens will benefit from having that information. So that is why we believe it would be important for the Minister of Finance, for the Bank of Canada, and I would concur if we can have a panel of economists who can provide insight, that would be helpful as well to us, and we don't have to have we don't have to meet for days. We can have a concise and productive and informative session that can help give Canadians, citizens and investors greater clarity during these uncertain times.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bryson. We'll go to Ms. Glover, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to welcome all of my colleagues back and hope that you have been having an interesting but somewhat rested summer. It has been a summer of concern. Canadians expressed to this government that the economy and jobs is of the utmost importance, which is why we introduced in the last government a plan. It was called the Action Plan. It was an action plan that helped to focus job creation. It helped to focus job creation in such a way that we now see over 600,000 jobs that have been created since July of 2009. That is a success story, so much of a success story that there are countries across this world that look at Canada with envy. And those countries are countries that our Minister of Finance is continually in contact with, that our Minister of Finance continues to dialogue with about the global economy, because it's not certain. And I have to agree with Mr. Bryson. There is uncertainty. But this meeting today is to talk about what we're going to do to instill confidence in Canadians and to ensure that they know that Canada has a plan. And that plan is the next phase of Canada's Economic Action Plan, a budget that was put forward by the Minister of Finance, a budget that was put forward by this government in anticipation of some risk, but is in anticipation of providing jobs and protecting the economy of this country. It's important that we as a Finance Committee do address the concerns of Canadians, but the Finance Committee must remain a serious forum. And I'm concerned today that the Finance Committee might go down a path of no return. And that path of no return is turning this forum into something that it was never designed to be. We're asking for a special meeting to talk about whether or not to instill confidence in Canadians and talk about a government plan. I'm in agreement that we ought to do that. And the people that we ought to invite to do that are the Minister of Finance and the Bank of Canada. And I would endorse, this government side would endorse, inviting the Minister of Finance on Friday morning at 9 a.m. to appear before this committee, and to invite a representative of the Bank of Canada to this committee on Friday from 10 to 11. Hopefully Governor Carney is available, but given the short notice period, he may not be available, but certainly we could ask for other representatives of the Bank of Canada. Let's not forget that the IMF and the OECD have said that Canada has weathered this storm very well and is expected to have one of the largest growths of the G7 countries. We just got a AAA rating because we have stability in our economic areas, we have stability in our institutional areas. Even an assessment of the government's financial strength was evaluated during that AAA credit rating. And we are considered to be very high in that area as well. I want to assure Canadians here today that this government is continually looking at the global economy. The Finance Minister has spoken as recently as last weekend with the G7 finance ministers. He speaks regularly with Governor Carney and will continue to do so to preserve the interests of Canadians. I believe this committee can do some good work here this week to continue to maintain that confidence. I hear from my riding that many people are concerned but are very thankful to be from Canada at this time. Very thankful that this government has taken some measures to protect their jobs, to protect this economy. Very thankful to be the envy of the world. And I think the Minister would be very, very happy to appear from 9 till 10 to further indicate what has gone on to ensure that we continue on this steady, prudent track. The leadership that's been shown has been commented about around the world. And so, again, I would endorse inviting the Minister of Finance from 9 till 10 and a representative from the Bank of Canada from 10 to 11 on Friday morning so that we can, again, continue to advise Canadians that this government is working hard and will continue to protect their interests when it comes to the global economy, when it comes to the economy of this country, and when it comes to creating and protecting their jobs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Glover. Mr. Mai, you want to comment?
Yes.
We'll go to Mr. Mai, please.
Yes. Well, again, je voudrais remercier tout le monde.
I would like to thank everyone for being here this evening. Welcome to all of you. Of course, what has happened recently is seen on markets around the world, in Europe and in the USA. It's created a lot of uncertainty, and so we are here today to address these uncertainties. We want to work together. We want to find solutions together, and this is why we have called for this meeting. What we're also looking for is the involvement of Canadians and to tell them what measures we intend to take. We are very pleased that the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Bank of Canada are on board. Further, we want to call on economists and other experts to share their views with us. It's very important that we understand what is happening in the economy, not only abroad, but the impact these events abroad have on Canadians. Many people in my writing have told me they're worried. Their jobs are being cut back, and this has created uncertainty. We also believe that we need to invest more in infrastructure. In my writing, for instance, there is the Champlain Bridge, which has to move forward. So we would like to find as many solutions as possible, and we believe that the way to do so is to hear different points of view, to understand what the different options are, to us to get through the events shaking up the world today, and also to give Canada a better way out. I think that we've done well so far, but we can do better, and that's why we want to meet as many people as possible to understand the options we have.
Marston and Mr. Hoback on the speakers list. So Ms. MacLeod, please.
Thank you, and I just want to pick up on the comments and certainly agree with the very important work of engaging Canadians in this conversation. And I think there's a few things I'd like to perhaps say is certainly in the riding that I represent, and I think in many ridings across the country, the MPs are currently doing that. We have the recent closure of the pre-budget consultation in terms of written submissions, and in just a few short weeks, we are going to be having a very, very comprehensive engagement of Canadians. So I think certainly every member of Parliament probably right now is having that conversation with their constituents, and that's going to really provide great information as we head into our pre-budget consultations.
Okay, thank you, Ms. MacLeod. Mr. Marston, please.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. I know that giving up some time in the riding is more precious to some than others, but I know that you're all working hard out there. I can see the furrowed brows from the concentration. All joking aside, just recently we heard a pronouncement from the Finance Minister that I think is heartening. He said he was prepared to spend more if he needed to spend more going forward, more economic stimulus. And in our discussions before coming here, we talked about the fact that for Canada to invest right now, to get the financing, the interest rates being so low out there is probably an optimum time. And of course, we know all the things that have been happening in Montreal area, particularly to draw attention to infrastructure. When you mentioned the AAA credit rating, that's earned. We agree. There's no doubt that Canada has done a good job for a number of years. I'm sure Mr. Bryson will have a comment from how many years that's been occurring. But the reality is the average Canadian that you sit down with in a Tim Hortons doesn't have an idea about how we even get graded on AAA credit. And there's kind of a feeling of being in the dark. Even though people in the know in financial services and companies and the people that employ across the country and do investments know, the average Canadian needs to be informed. And this is one of the options for doing that. So I appreciate hearing that the suggestion for Friday. I'm certainly willing to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marston. I have Mr. Hoback and then Mr. Bryson.
Well, thank you, Chair. I guess I'm just sensing around here that there seems to be consensus around the committee, and it's nice to see this because this is very important that everybody understands that we're Canadians, we do things a little differently than other countries, and that we sit around the table and we talk about things and we get the right thing done on behalf of Canadians. I guess I'm looking at what I'm seeing around here for consensus, and I guess I'll make a motion that, Chair, that we actually go forward with a meeting on Friday at 9 o'clock with the Minister of Finance being called at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock and representative of the Bank of Kearney, preferably Mark Kearney, but if he's unavailable, then a representative, from 10 to 11, and that would be the start of this consultations. And then I'd like to remind the committee members, like Labienne, my motion there, that what Ms. McLeod has said is absolutely true. We'll start our budget pre-consults for next year. We're going to have a chance to talk to a lot of economists. We're going to have a chance to talk to a lot of Canadians across the country. And I'm sure the economy is going to be the main issue that we're going to be talking about, and options for the economy as we move forward. So that might be a more appropriate time after we've got good information from both the Finance Minister and the Bank of Canada on the current situation. So I make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoback. I just want to advise, we do need to indicate what we're studying in your motion. Now, from the letter itself, if you were to take the wording, one option is to say that the committee undertake a study on the current debt crisis and economic turmoil in the United States and Europe and its potential impact on Canada, and that the committee invite the Minister of Finance and the Governor of Bank of Canada to appear on Friday, August the 19th. Is that?
I think, Chair, we're just looking to update Canadians on the current situation. So can we do a little bit of work?
I mean, you need to indicate what topic we're discussing.
Well, I guess the topic was laid out in the NDP letter. So
that's exactly what I quoted. So.
Yeah.
If you want to.
It's in the notice.
Yeah, I think I could live with that. I can live with that.
Okay, so that the committee undertake a study on the current debt crisis and economic turmoil in the United States and Europe and its potential impact on Canada, and that the committee invite the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Bank of Canada to present to the committee. Mr. Hoback.
Yeah.
Or
representatives.
Yep.
So let's go to debates on the motion.
Okay, but still. Debate on the motion, then?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to.
Then I have Mr. Bryson, I have Ms. Nash, and then Ms. Glover.
Yeah. I think there's broad-based agreement to invite the Minister and the Governor or representative of the Bank of Canada for Friday morning. Where I think there may be some delta between our positions is whether to invite some other economists to hear from them. And I think Ms. Glover said that we don't want to go down a path of no return. I don't think inviting economists, we've got a former president of the Economics Club of Toronto sitting across from us. We're not averse to non-government economists. I think that, if anything, having the Minister of Finance, having a representative of the Bank of Canada, and a panel, a few economists, eminent Canadian economists, to provide some analysis on the current situation, I think that would be actually helpful in providing even greater clarity and information for Canadian citizens and investors. So I personally would like to see us also invite some economists on Friday.
Bryson, Ms. Nash, please.
Yeah, if it's possible in that spirit, I'd like to move an amendment that we also include a panel of economists on Friday. I think that hearing from the Finance Minister is important, and hearing from the Governor of the Bank of Canada is obviously important, given the changing realities. But I think to also really bring Canadians in on the debate, it would be important to have a diversity of views, and it would be helpful to have some economists and a diversity of economists. I think there are people who have different views, different ideas. I think it's important in a spirit of saying let's be glad that our economy is not in the state that some others are, but are there things that we could look at as options? And I'd like to propose an amendment to that effect, that we include some independent economists in our meeting on Friday. If we're all going to be here, I think that would be it would be an opportunity for that. I think it would bring more Canadians in on the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nash. We'll go to Ms. Glover, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to very briefly touch on what Mr. Bryson had to say, and I want to explain a little better what my comments meant. There have been, Chair, 2 news releases released by the Liberal member of this committee over the summer. And it wasn't until about an hour before this very meeting that I actually heard from that member. This is a pretty collaborative committee, typically. Ms. Nash and myself have spoken a number of times. We are concerned about the economy. If we have true concern, we talk to one another. And it's in that vein that I made that statement. Mr. Bryson was truly concerned and felt it's urgent. I'm quite surprised not to have heard from him until an hour before this meeting began. Pre-budget consultations are already being planned. People's schedules are being looked at, rooms are being booked, trips are being booked. We are about 3 weeks away, as of Friday, about 3 to 4 weeks away from beginning pre-budget consultations. That is where we are going to hear from all of the folks that we just talked about. I don't see an urgency to disrupt all of that. Friday, we are going to hear from people who will be able to update us immediately. And then I think this committee ought to continue, as they've done, listening to not just economists, but hundreds of Canadians. We've already received over 300 requests, apparently, written submissions to this committee. Pre-budget consultation will take all of those factors into account. And let's not forget, there are economists who provided projections so that we ended up with this document, this invaluable document, which is the next phase of Canada's Economic Action Plan. It's thanks to those independent experts and economists that this document is a living document now. So, again, a proposal's been made. We're happy to do the meeting on Friday to try to ensure that Canadians hear from our minister about an update, that they hear from the Bank of Canada about an update, but anything more would frankly not be acceptable at this point. I believe that it's important that we stick to that agenda and continue with our pre-budget consultations. It's imperative, in my opinion, that we not do anything that might worry Canadians. And I think hearing from the Minister of Finance and the Bank of Canada will help to reassure them, as they should be, that there is concern, but we are proceeding as parliamentarians in their interests. And I don't want to see this committee grandstand. I don't want to see this committee play political games. So I would say let's move to vote. We know each other's positions, and let's vote on a meeting as proposed by Randy Hoback for Friday.
Okay. I have 3 more people. I think it's becoming very clear where people are at. So I just ask members to keep their comments very brief. We have Randy Hoback, Mr. Marsden, and Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Chair. And I have to reiterate what the Parliamentary Secretary said. I won't repeat that because she said it so well. I guess I'm just thinking with the recommendation of both Mr. Bryson and Ms. Nash, and, I'm looking at the 2-hour time period. I think Canadians would really want to hear from the Finance Minister for a period of time, and I think we want to give him a proper time for you to properly ask him appropriate questions. Same with the Bank of Canada. So to water down that time, I think would first of all be inappropriate. Second of all, I want to make sure that in this meeting that, like the PS Parliamentary Secretary had said, that we don't have people come in here and start speculating and start giving their opinions and their impressions, which are based on what? A crystal ball. I think it's better that we stick to the facts, and I think the 2 people that can provide the best facts are the finance minister and the Bank of Canada. So I think that's where we need to stick to in this meeting, and then keep in mind that we do have our pre-budget consultations coming up. Hopefully you've got your economists lined up for his witnesses. And I think that's a good time in that spirit to talk about options and alternatives, because it's based on what would be presented in the next budget, and wouldn't be based on a crisis that has happened in the past.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Marston, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to go back to our original motion and what we were talking about. We're not talking about pre-budget hearings. We're talking about addressing the situation in other countries and the potential impact on Canada going forward. These are immediate things that are happening in Greece and Italy and other countries right now. And yes, Canada is doing well relative to them, but there are potential impacts, and Canadians are worried. And certainly it's not intended to water down the finance minister's time. I'd be thrilled to have him here for an hour. Set aside some more time in the afternoon to have a panel of some people to come in. Perhaps in essence we'll validate what we hear but I think it's important to have that broader voice.
Thank you. Mr. Bryson, please.
To Ms. Glover's point on the economists, she referred to private sector economists as having provided some of the projections, the assumptions upon which the budget numbers were based. And that's the point, because the situation has changed, and as such there will be an effect on budget numbers, and it would be helpful to hear from the economists on that. I mean, I can understand the government's desire to turn Friday into a propaganda exercise, but I think that Parliament has a responsibility actually to help provide information and clarity to Canadians, not just the government's message track, which would come from the Minister of Finance, but also from independent economists and respected economists in Canada as to what the impact will be. Now, if they're not here at this committee, they will be speaking to the journalists after the committee, and they will be speaking with journalists about their views on what the minister has said. That is not as effective as actually having Parliament draw from, in a very constructive way, that information from them here at a parliamentary committee, where you're not going to silence Canadian bank or labour economists. They will communicate with the media on Friday, but it would be very helpful if they were to be able to do that in a parliamentary forum and to participate. I think that would be helpful, and I reiterate that we're trying to be constructive here.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Nash, please, very briefly.
Yeah, I did put an amendment out suggesting that we include other voices. You know, we're appreciative that the committee has gotten together this evening, and we're appreciative of the offer of the minister to meet on Friday. I think that's a positive thing, and with the Bank of Canada. I do think that it is important to hear other voices, and it doesn't necessarily have to be economists, but I mean, we know, for example, that Canadian corporations are sitting on about $500 billion of cash right now. Is this the best time to go ahead with more corporate tax cuts? You know, are there a diversity of views on that? You know, are we getting the private sector investment that we really need to keep the economy growing? It would be wise for us to just hear a diversity of views. So I don't want to belabor it, but I just think it would be good to consider that. And I know we are having pre-budget hearings coming up in about a month, but boy, things can change quickly, as we've seen over the last week or so. A couple of days can change everything, and you know, I think Canada is relatively well positioned, but we do have some weaknesses, and we shouldn't be afraid of looking at those with a view to seeing how we can better position ourselves for the future, and keep growing our economy and keep Canadians as economically healthy and sound as possible going forward. So it's in that spirit that I'm putting that forward.
Okay, thank you. I have Mr. Adler, if I can ask you to be very brief, and I'd like to move to a vote.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chair. I call the question.
Can't really call the question at all. I appreciate the suggestion. So it will be first on Ms. Nash's amendment, and I'll just read the motion that the committee undertake a study on the current debt crisis and economic turmoil in the United States and Europe and its potential impact on Canada, and that the committee invite the Minister of Finance and Governor of the Bank of Canada or representatives to appear before the committee. And the amendment by Ms. Nash is to invite economists and other witnesses to appear as well. Is that correct, Ms. Nash? Okay, so the vote will be on Ms. Nash's amendment. All those in favor? I see 5. All those opposed? I see 6. The amendment's defeated. It's now on the main motion. All those in favor? That's unanimous. It's carried. Thank you. I guess we will see you Friday morning. And if I can't make it, Mr. Mai will be the chair of the meeting. Thank you all. Appreciate that. Meeting adjourned.